Come with me back to the 80s where Jessica and Elizabeth Wakefield were the hottest teens in Southern California in Sweet Valley High. Hi everyone, I'm Rosie Blythe. I'm the author of the Princess Guide to Life book series, and I want to talk to you today about another book series which shaped my teen years. I think I started reading Sweet Valley High when I was about 12 and I've never stopped. So I discovered Sweet Valley High through Sweet Valley Twins, which is the prequel when the twins are 12. And then I kind of graduated to Sweet Valley High when they're 16. So this was the original and the most famous version of the stories, but obviously they had prequels, they had sequels, they had like all kinds of stuff. So I was just in the mood to read my Sweet Valley High books again. I will kind of periodically just reread these books every so often, and I haven't gone through them for maybe 6 years, 7 years, something like that. And it just felt like it was time to revisit them again. And whenever I do this, I get really into them and I like read them all. I don't have every single Sweet Valley High book, but I do have up to 100, and then I've got a few after that as well, and I've got the kind of extra like Spring Fever and Summer whatever. So I thought it'd be fun while I'm rereading them, might as well just chat to you about them as well. And kind of get some thoughts off my chest, because there's a lot to unpack in Sweet Valley High. So you guys know I like to dress the part when I make these videos. This was my most 80s kind of outfit, and the blue eyeshadow, I do feel a little bit like a clown, but never mind. I'm not going to dress up for every one of them. Can you imagine? Sweet Valley High is the brainchild of Francine Pascal, who started out as a scriptwriter for a soap opera, and she'd already written one young adult book series which had been made into a TV special called My Mother Was Never a Kid. She originally pitched Sweet Valley High as a TV show, but the execs weren't ready for it, so she launched it as a book series instead. So here's the quote. A friend of mine had lunch with a book editor, a man who said, "Why isn't there a Dallas for young people?" Dallas being the hot TV show at the time. She had a book proposal due, which she didn't have at the time, and she said she knew a lot of twins. And so she said, I sat down and I wrote a character bible and the first 12 Sweet Valley High stories. So whether she actually wrote them herself, or I think she commissioned ghostwriters, I think this article goes on to say, and Bantam Books loved it and they ordered the first 12 books. So she oversaw a team of ghostwriters who worked on her character bible and the detailed outlines she created for each story. So it's interesting she didn't actually write them at all herself. I guess if you know exactly what you want to happen and you've got the money to hire ghostwriters, I guess why not? I mean, I think these were coming out once a month when they kind of hit their stride, so you can't really do that one person. So I know a lot of people talk about how the later books got kind of silly, and they did. There were werewolves and vampires and stuff. Some of the later books kind of steal from movies, but we'll get to those when we get to them. So yeah, these books, they just multiplied. There was Sweet Valley High, and then she did like even historical legacy, like going back and meeting Elizabeth and Jessica's like grandparents and stuff, and other characters, which was pretty cool actually, and like quite a nice way to learn history. So as I said, I came to these books through Sweet Valley Twins. I was actually working at a fair when I was 12 with my dad. It was my school like fundraiser, and so my dad and I were running the bookstore, and there was a bunch, like an array of these Sweet Valley Twins books, and I was like, oh, I'll buy a couple of those, and I bought 4, and this actually kind of haunts me. There was a whole array of them and I didn't buy them all for like 20p each because I didn't know they were going to become this like beloved part of my reading life. But anyway, I used to hit up like secondhand bookshops when I was a teenager, and sometimes you would find a pretty good haul of Sweet Valley High books, and I used to actually have like a recurring dream that I'd found a whole bunch. And last night, because I guess I knew I was going to be filming this today, I actually had the dream again. I dreamt I went to a shop and I was like, oh, all these Sweet Valley High books I don't have, I'm going to grab them. So yeah, now you have an insight into how sad I am. So we have the prequel Sweet Valley Twins when they're 12. They are really fun books. I might have to do some videos on them as well. And then they had the Sweet Valley Kids, which is when they were 7, which I was like already too old to be reading those by the time I kind of knew about them. But I guess that's a good way to get kids hooked at an early age, and then they'll just carry on like through their ages. They'll just keep reading more of the books. It's a really good business strategy, I think. So these books are very much a product of their time, which we will talk about in each book. But they were very white, like these kids, just everyone in school is white. Later on I think they certainly had some non-white characters, and I think they even had a gay character, maybe. I can't remember now, but we'll get to that, I'm sure. So there was an attempt, I think that was like in the 90s, it was like, oh yeah, we should like be a little bit more diverse, a bit more politically correct. But the books are not politically correct. I mean, everyone is incredibly good looking and slim. Anyone who isn't good looking and slim will be ostracised until they become good looking and slim. So Sweet Valley High is centred on the Wakefield twins, Elizabeth and Jessica. Elizabeth's a good twin, she's very studious and conscientious. She always tries to do the right thing. Jessica is the naughty twin. She's always getting herself into trouble and doing naughty things, and she just relies on Liz to get her out of it, which she always does. And it's funny because when you read them as an adult, you're like, why do the parents just enable Jessica? Like, they know that she kind of manipulates Elizabeth into like doing her chores in the house. It's like, why don't they ever step in? They're bad parents. And their kids get kidnapped like several times. But yeah, Jessica is a classic mean girl, to be honest. She kind of bullies people at school, but they don't call it that. She's pretty much a sociopath because she genuinely does not care about anyone but herself. She will screw over her own twin, literally, to get what she wants. So she's pretty awful. But yeah, she does have some redeeming features which come out so that you end up kind of going, okay, yeah, she's kind of an okay person. But considering that she is like the star of the book, and I guess we're meant to admire her to some extent, it's kind of dodgy. But it's no different from Gossip Girl with Blair and Serena doing pretty bad things. And I do think Gossip Girl is kind of similar to Sweet Valley High. I guess any high school, you know, book series or TV series is going to cover some of the same stuff, but I mean, Chuck Bass, definitely Bruce Patman. And Blair Waldorf, definitely Jessica and Lila. Serena is kind of Jessica and Elizabeth because she's kind of like the slightly more good one, but like not really. But yeah, so the Sweet Valley is a community. We get to know lots of different characters, but it's always centred around Jessica and Elizabeth. So most of the stories are either Jessica getting into a scrape and Elizabeth having to get her out of it, or Jessica will have like a little side plot about her like doing something funny, like having a wacky money making scheme or whatever, and then the Elizabeth plot will be someone in school is having a problem and she helps them solve it. So those are kind of formulas. And I have to talk about the cover art. Just so gorgeous, isn't it? I love the cover art. I know that I'm not the only person who enjoyed getting all the books out on the floor and just like looking at all the pictures. They're so fun. And I didn't realise until recently they were actually posed by models. So there is a real woman who Jessica and Elizabeth's face was based on, which is very cool. The cover artist was James Matthews. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce his name. And the model was a young lady called Jonna Lee Stack, who also worked as an actress, as we can see here. When they did a TV series and Francine Pascal was like, oh yeah, the actresses we found, these twins, they look like they walked out of the books. I'm like, no they don't look like the covers. This is Jessica and Elizabeth. No, they have to look like this. You can imagine some kind of AI animation making the covers come to life. I think that would be very cool. Francine Pascal, she's kind of strange because there's this character Bible where, you would think it would be fairly consistent. But the books are kind of famous for being inconsistent, massive inconsistencies, which we will cover as we get to each book. But I think that if you're gonna have a bunch of ghostwriters writing books, and if you're coming up with the plots yourself, you should know what's going on. And also she always had this kind of fascination with getting Jessica together with Todd, who is Elizabeth's longtime boyfriend in the series. And so when they did the Sweet Valley Confidential, which is like coming back when they're like 25 or 26 or something like that, Jessica's married to Todd. It's like, no, Francine, stop trying to make this happen. They don't like each other. So yeah, that's kind of annoying that she I feel like the readers ended up knowing the characters better than Francine Pascal did. No disrespect to Francine though, rest in peace, because she did create this phenomenon, which we can still enjoy today. There's a quote here from an interview where Francine Pascal says, I never really had the respect for Sweet Valley that I had for my other young adult books. I felt it was kind of soap opera and that was kind of a lesser thing. I was wrong because it had an enormous effect on people. But that perhaps lack of respect is maybe where the you know, continuity errors come in and putting characters in together in relationships who would never have relationships. They did also try to kind of reboot them a few years ago, because obviously they are very dated. Even just the fact that they don't have mobile phones and they're not using Instagram and Snapchat and stuff. Trouble is, if you take cell phones out of it, most of the plot lines wouldn't make sense, because like many, you know, thriller type things in the 80s, they would depend on someone not being able to get hold of somebody. I guess you would just have to have like, oh, there's no signal here or something. You'd have to find some way that like, oh, we can't communicate. My phone's out of battery. But yeah, they are very dated. And so the reboots, instead of Jessica and Elizabeth being a perfect size 6, that's a US size 6, so I guess in the UK that would be a size 10. So, you know, slim but not like skinny. They changed it to a size 0, which would be a size 4 in the UK, which is teeny tiny. So I do think that's quite offensive that like the perfect size just shrank.
Hey, just a quick note while I'm editing. Sorry, they're actually a size 4, not a 0, which would make them a UK size 8. But I still think it's outrageous that they've changed size purely because of the fashion of the day, and that a size 6 is no longer considered perfection.
And I think they should have stuck with them just being size 6, because they, I mean, they're athletic. The twins, I mean, Jessica's a cheerleader. Elizabeth doesn't actually seem to do much exercise, but somehow she just stay slim. They're always off to the Dairy Burger to eat burgers after school, so I don't know how they stay so slim. I suppose they're in school, they're like running, they're doing PE at school, I guess. So they have a fabulous bunch of characters, and I think it's very real that like each character is good and bad. As readers, I think we're supposed to identify more with Elizabeth, because it's quite often the books are more from her perspective than from Jessica's, because she's the one going, oh, what's Jessica up to now? How do I stop this from turning into a catastrophe? And I think also because Elizabeth loves reading, and obviously we're reading books, so we probably love reading too, and Elizabeth wants to be a writer. Writers love writing about writers. Like, I mean, Jo March in Little Women. Stephen King's always having like writer characters, isn't he, in his books? And I'm sure there are lots of other examples I can't think of right now. But you know, like writers just like coming up with a character who's like, yeah, I want to be a writer, And it's funny because when I was reading them when I was like 12, you know, you're reading them going, oh yeah, 16-year-olds, they're so grown up, they're so glamorous, they're doing all this stuff. And then when you get to 16 and you're like, yeah,
My school experience was not quite like this.
I feel like I had my Sweet Valley experience in like my early 20s. I think that's when I was zipping around, driving my car around and going out, you know, literally every night and just having fun with my friends. So yeah, if you haven't had your Sweet Valley High era yet, don't worry, it's never too late. You can do it in your 50s if you want to. When I was younger, I admired Elizabeth a lot. I felt she was, and I think it had a really positive influence on me as a teenager, because Elizabeth was doing all this stuff that I don't think many 16-year-olds in reality would do, or certainly I feel maybe not today, but maybe in the 80s they were more kind of grown up from an early age. So she would like, you know, chase up the local newspaper and send them articles like, please let me write for you. She would like drive places all by herself just with a map. And so sometimes when I was sort of young, I would be like, you know, making a fuss about something that I thought was a big deal. And I would kind of think, well, Elizabeth would just get on with this. She would just go and just do this thing. So it did have a really positive influence on me. And I think, you know, whether it's realistic that these 16-year-olds are kind of like, they're very kind of middle-aged, you know, they're all in couples and they do like couples dinner parties and like, you're 16, come on. But reading them now, I just think, oh, Elizabeth, she's such a ninny. She just lets Jessica get away with so much crap. And if she maybe just let Jessica get into trouble once in a while, maybe she wouldn't do such ridiculous things, because she kind of knows Elizabeth is going to bail her out. So Elizabeth enables her, and it's not a positive thing. That's just all I'm saying. And you see this kind of dynamic of like one character who's kind of good and sort of innocent and just does as they're told, and then like one character who's like more sneaky and manipulates the other one. I mean, I always think sounds like a really bizarre comparison, but in Britain we have the very popular old sitcom called Only Fools and Horses, where it's like two brothers, and one's younger and kind of naive, Rodney, and then you've got Del Boy, the older brother, who kind of like, he's a wheeler dealer, he's always like doing stuff, and he manipulates Rodney and will lie to him for his own advantage. And I always kind of think like, they're Wakefield twins. They do predate them though.
And I think the genius of Sweet Valley High and what has made it such an enduring classic for teen girls and older grown-up ladies is that not only do you have the standard high school dramas and the realistic duality of characters who can be both good and bad, heroic and also incredibly stupid or misguided at times, but you have the added bonus of the star characters being twins, which not only adds this sort of glitz and glamour of them always being at the centre of any social scene, but you have plots you couldn't have otherwise, like the twins switching identities, creating confusion, playing tricks on people. Being identical is sometimes a hindrance, but can also come in super handy. And I think the Wakefields capture the imagination because you have this bond between them that is sometimes tested to the extreme, but it cannot be broken. And you also can't help noticing how useful it would be to have a clone to take your place occasionally. The TV show is a lot of fun. It's more of a straight-up comedy than a drama, and 90s shows just have a whole different vibe. I feel like the TV shows aimed at young teens today, from what I've seen, are just falling over themselves to be politically correct and basically shove a message down everyone's throat, rather than just be entertaining. What do you think? Let me know. Also, this has the catchiest theme tune, and I now have it permanently stuck in my head.
In a crowded hall, you see there's a beauty standing. Is she really everywhere, or a reflection? One always calls out to you, the other shy and quiet. Could there be two different girls who look the same at Sweet Valley, Sweet Valley High, Sweet Valley, Sweet Valley, Sweet Valley High.
So thank you so much for allowing me to indulge in my love for Sweet Valley High. Thank you for liking the video. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. And I hope that you'll join me for the next one. Bye.